Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering woke panic as Trump classified documents case dismissed by judge. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Well, it looks like the Florida case is finally done for. This judge heard a lot of issues, but the issue that ended the case was that Jack Smith was appointed unconstitutionally. That actually is a very big deal. When Jack Smith was given the authority to be a special counsel and run a special counsel office on this case, he was not appointed by the President of the United States. He was not then approved by the Senate to have the authority that he took on. He was set up as a political actor to go after political enemies of the administration, which of course the biggest political enemy of the administration is Donald Trump. Because of the way Jack Smith was set up to operate his prosecutions, he had massive authority that he didn't earn the way that you're supposed to earn authority through the U.S. Constitution. And beyond that, there was no congressional oversight, so no one to question his authority, no one to question what he was doing. And there was no limit to his funding. If a normal U.S. attorney who is appointed by the president and then has to be approved by the Senate to have that much authority had brought this case, they would have had congressional oversight. So they could be asked questions like, why are you doing this? And is it appropriate that you're doing that? But not Jack Smith. He also would have had a limit to his funding. There are budgets established for a U.S. attorney. There was no budget established for Jack Smith. He could spend whatever he wanted to spend. When you have that kind of free spending going on, there's no limit to your political prosecutions. Even Eric Holder said it himself years ago. One of the things that limits prosecutions and prosecutions getting abused is the limit to the funding for a case. You're not supposed to be able to just spend tens of millions of dollars on whatever political witch hunts you want to pursue under the power of the U.S. government. And that's what Aileen M put a stop to. That's why she dismissed the case. From the Washington Post, Trump's classified documents case dismissed by Judge Aileen M. The Florida judge accepted a long-shot legal argument embraced by conservatives that special counsel Jack Smith was improperly appointed. The argument to get rid of Jack Smith was a long shot. Of course, everyone on the left didn't agree with that argument, but it was supported by a couple of former attorneys general that it was inappropriate to appoint someone who was not only as a U.S. attorney, but was never appointed by the president, never approved by the Senate. That's different when you're even talking about Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller used to be the head of the FBI. He had been appointed by the president before. He had been approved by the Senate before, not as a special counsel, but at least he'd been deemed appropriate and credible to hold a certain amount of authority. That said, Andrew Weissman, who has his own reputation as a political actor, as a prosecutor, actually ran the Mueller investigation. It really wasn't Robert Mueller, but that's another story. From the New York Times, judge dismisses classified documents case against Trump. Judge Aileen M ruled that the entire case should be thrown out because the appointment of the special counsel who brought the case, Jack Smith, had violated the Constitution. Her decision is sure to be appealed, but they will lose the appeal. If they don't lose it at the appellate level, the courts just above Aileen M, they will definitely lose it when it comes to the Supreme Court. Keep in mind, Justice Thomas just recently used the Trump immunity ruling to question Jack Smith's appointment. And Judge Aileen M did rely on his comments in the immunity decision to say, okay, not constitutional, we're not doing this. The appeals court that oversees Aileen M is the 11th Circuit. The Supreme Court justice who oversees the 11th Circuit is Justice Clarence Thomas. When this case goes to the Supreme Court, which I expect it will, the Supreme Court will find that these kinds of special counsels, without an appointment by the president, without approval by the Senate, are unconstitutional, right for the time when probably Donald Trump will win power and will get into the presidency. And all of these people pushing all of these political prosecutions can then smile and say, hey, it's a good thing that Donald Trump can't just pick out 100 people, make them all special counsels, and send them to prosecute his enemies. Yes, he can still give work to U.S. attorneys, and yes, there's ways of prosecuting people, but this unchecked power where you could just use a special counsel to go after a political enemy and say, oh, you can't have any oversight, and oh, they can't have any limit to their funding, was always ridiculous and was an abuse of the Justice Department. The reason why it's become an issue now is they've gone so wild with the lawfare, from the state cases to the federal cases to the civil cases to all the original and novel ideas they have to try to figure out a way to go after Donald Trump, that they've abused their discretion enough that it's now become such an issue that it's going to get shut down for everybody. Both sides won't have access to this kind of special counsel, and neither of them really should. A judge on Monday dismissed the federal indictment against former President Donald Trump on charges of mishandling classified documents, his second seismic legal victory in less than a month, following a historic win before the Supreme Court. All of Trump's wins, of course, are going to be one after another now, because all of his cases were planned out to happen right before the 2024 election to damage him for the election. Let's be honest. I mean, look, almost 2 weeks ago, Jack Smith's department put out this political ridiculous concept that the Justice Department plans to pursue Trump cases past Election Day, even if he wins. They decided that if Donald Trump is elected president, the finish line for their federal prosecutions is Inauguration Day, the day he literally becomes president, not wins. Literally the day he becomes president, January 20th, 2025, not Election Day. That is one of the most political and ridiculous statements they could possibly make. No, they don't have an ability to do that. If Donald Trump won on Election Day, the time between Election Day and Inauguration Day has always been considered a sensitive time for the U.S. government. That's a time when enemies could attack. It comes up every 4 years. Trust me, they always say that. And beyond that, there's a transition team issue where they're transitioning one administration to another administration. There's a lot of information going back and forth, a lot of contacts going back and forth, security clearances, all kinds of issues. There isn't time for political attacks during Election Day and Inauguration Day, no matter who wins. Not a politicized attack through the Justice Department. So this was never realistically going to happen because the Supreme Court would have stepped in and said, listen, this is nonsensical, cut it out. But it just shows you how far they're willing to go to abuse the Justice Department, just for political means or maybe to try to get the cases going. And even though they can't conclude, they could apply enough political pressure and use their media contacts and leaks to try to force Donald Trump to allow these cases to go on, even though he could shut them down as president. It's such an overextension and it's such an abuse. It's really ridiculous. U.S. District Judge Aileen M. Cannon's 93-page ruling that special counsel Jack Smith was improperly appointed is a triumph for Trump, even if it's eventually reversed on appeal. Trump's lawyers have attempted long-shot argument after long-shot argument to dismiss the case before this gambit succeeded far beyond expectations. Other courts have rejected arguments similar to the one that Trump's team made in Florida about the legality of Smith's appointment. And while other courts have upheld the argument, each of those situations are specific and unique. You can get away with almost anything in the Washington, D.C. courts, as we've seen time and time again. By dismissing the entire indictment, Cannon's decision also means that the charges are dropped for Trump's two co-defendants, Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira. Even if Cannon's ruling is eventually overruled, the decision to dismiss Trump's indictment adds to a string of legal victories for him in recent weeks, including a sweeping Supreme Court ruling July 1st that gives former presidents broad immunity for their official acts while in office. And from the New York Times, we have live updates and comments from the dismissal of the classified documents case. From Glenn Thrush, Justice Department officials have no immediate plans to seek Cannon's removal from the case, according to several people familiar with the situation. So they leak to the New York Times all the time to push their narratives. They're not looking to get rid of Judge Cannon just yet because they don't want to seem hysterical. Also, they need to figure out how this affects the D.C. case. The D.C. case is in a lot of trouble. Even though Judge Cannon is trying to play it straight, and always has been, many believe that Judge Chutkan, who is in charge of the January 6th case, has been constantly siding with the special counsel. Now, Trump's attorneys are going to, of course, use this decision by Aileen Cannon And the statement from Justice Thomas deciding and advising that special counsel Jack Smith has no authority to bring his cases and will take this canon decision to say that Trump can't be prosecuted in D.C., blowing up the Washington, D.C. January 6th case that Jack Smith is supposed to be prosecuting in. But it will be delaying them until the case can get heard in the Supreme Court over whether or not Jack Smith actually had the authority to bring these charges in the first place. And as we've seen from the Supreme Court, they've about had it with the lawfare. They've about had it with the special interpretations that they think allow them to pursue Trump in criminal cases to damage him politically. This is not what we're supposed to be doing, going after our political opposition to try to weaken them and damage them before elections is not what the courts are supposed to be there for. The Supreme Court is well aware of this. And because of these multiple cases, the Supreme Court can respond and has been responding to punish the Justice Department, embarrass the Justice Department, and remove authority from the Justice Department to prevent them from doing this ever again. The more the Justice Department pushes with political cases, the more the Supreme Court is going to overrule them and prevent them from doing this kind of thing in the future. So the end of the criminal case brought by Jack Smith in Florida is very likely the end of the criminal case brought by Jack Smith in Washington, D.C. Yes, these charges could be filed by another U.S. attorney in each of those local jurisdictions. Yes, the Attorney General could appoint a U.S. attorney as special counsel like he did with Attorney Weiss to go after Hunter Biden eventually. And that U.S. attorney could bring cases in multiple jurisdictions against Trump if they really wanted to. They'd have to have the funding for it. They'd also, though, have to not be risking their political career in the future over doing a case like this, because U.S. attorneys think about that as well. They have a career that they're concerned about, as opposed to Jack Smith, who was just brought in to do political prosecutions. And even if they did that, it would take a long time to organize all the things they need to organize to bring the charges. There's about zero chance of them being able to do that prior to the election, prior to Inauguration Day. And beyond that, the Supreme Court is just about ready to shut all of this nonsense down and will continue to take any cases that have anything to do with a former president, as they have been doing in every case with Trump. Glenn Thrush points out here, Cannon based her dismissal of the Florida case on the fact that Jack Smith was not appointed by the Senate or the president. By contrast, the special counsel investigating Hunter Biden, David Weiss, is also the U.S. attorney for Delaware, a Senate-confirmed post. That could make any challenge to the Weiss appointment more difficult, according to John Fishwick, a former U.S. attorney from Virginia. And the reason being is that you've got the authority as a U.S. attorney to go after a case. It didn't matter whether or not they had the special counsel designation when you're a U.S. attorney appointed by a president and approved by the Senate. It does matter when you're going in jurisdictions outside of the area you're appointed for, like Delaware. It could possibly interfere with a tax case against Hunter Biden in California, but it's not going to save Hunter Biden the way it saves Trump. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.